China's President Xi Jinping is on his first trip overseas since the coronavirus pandemic began. He's currently meeting his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. The gathering in Uzbekistan comes hot on the heels of Russia suffering embarrassing defeats on the battlefield in Ukraine. The pair, along with the leaders of Iran and India, are in Samarkand for the 8-nation Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It aims to serve as a counterweight to U.S. influence in the region. We can now bring in our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, great to see you as always. This is Vladimir Putin's first high-profile interaction with another world leader since what recently happened in Ukraine.
Since the invasion of Ukraine, we could say.
Yeah.
Look, and especially with Xi, right? You know, Xi and Putin have forged a sort of unique sort of bond here. This is their, second face-to-face meeting this year. Their last one was back in February at the very beginning of the Olympics, and it was there that they famously both signed a statement declaring a limitless, a no-limits friendship between their two nations. And at the time, the idea was to sort of forge a bond against what they both shared in common was this perception of Western hegemony in the West, i.e. the U.S. and Europe, trying to form a unipolar world and try to bring these countries, humiliate them, and try to basically reign supreme over the rest of the planet. So they wanted to forge an alliance against that sort of Western hegemony as they see it. Now, look, Putin and Xi have met 38 times. That is more than twice as many as Putin's met with any other leader, I believe, in recent years. But here's the thing. There are limits to that limitless friendship, and we're seeing it in exactly what you mentioned. This war in Ukraine for Putin is the reason, he's coming into this summit in Samarkand, which is a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Council. It's a multi-nation council formed by Beijing, by China back in 2001. It's been around a while, groups a lot of Central Asian nations, but obviously China, Russia grabbing all the headlines here. But Putin walking into this, isolated yet more defiant than ever on the home front, following those recent reported losses on the battlefield in Ukraine. Xi Jinping wants to project confidence. He himself hasn't left China since January 2020. You have to go back to the beginning of COVID when he went to Myanmar. So he's also trying to show he's confident again. And this coming at a time where, as you know, China continues lockdowns and zero COVID policy, continues to lock down multi-million population cities very controversially, which is hurting its economy. He's also facing those tensions, notably with the U.S., over the self-ruled island of Taiwan. And he's also facing a party Congress where he hopes to be elected to a third 5-year term of the Communist Party leadership in the coming months. So there are a lot of tensions and a lot of stuff that both these leaders come to this summit facing. And the question is, who needs who more? Because while they have a limitless friendship, and while it's true that Beijing has not taken part in Western sanctions against Russia, it has continued, along with India, to buy tons of oil from Russia, has boosted Russia perhaps economically, and has lent it rhetorical political support for its campaign against Ukraine. It has not sold it weapons. It has not given it any of that. It has not given it logistical backup. Yes, China has blamed the U.S. and Europe for stoking the tensions of this war, essentially blaming them and not Russia for the war. But at the same time, it's trying to play it safe. It doesn't want to burn its bridges. Xi does not want to burn its bridges with Biden and put himself at odds with the rest of the international community. Doesn't want to put all of China's trade on the world stage at risk. So it's a delicate balancing act for Xi Jinping. Limitless friendship has its limits.
Now, Doug, Central Asian leaders have also gathered for this summit in Uzbekistan. Clearly, Russia holds a lot of influence in the region, but things are starting to shift.
Yeah. What is starting to shift? What I was just talking about is Putin's losses on the battlefield, indisputable, which are also being talked about remarkably at home in a country where he has quashed all dissent and made it a law to so-called discredit the army or even call the invasion a war. Despite that, you're having voices against him at home right now. And I think that there's a perception among the Central Asian allies, notably countries like Uzbekistan where they're meeting, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan. They're looking at Moscow. Sure, they've always relied on Putin as sort of a benefactor, as a political supporter ally, but they're seeing some weaknesses here, and they want to sort of preserve their own sovereignty. They don't want Moscow to walk all over them while they need it. It's a very delicate balancing act. If they perceive weaknesses or a kink in Putin's armor, they can jump. Look at Kazakhstan. That's a country that Xi Jinping arrived in before going on to Uzbekistan for this summit meeting. He arrived there, and basically he's trying to gain influence for China as well. These Central Asian countries are playing quite a balancing act here between Russia and China. They know that China is also extremely important for them, potentially commercially. Kazakhstan has sent humanitarian aid to Ukraine. To give you a sense of the degree to which it's broken from Moscow. It has also refused to recognize the Russian-backed separatist regions in eastern Ukraine. That has really riled a lot of people in high positions of power in Moscow. So you could just see that Kazakhstan, the largest Central Asian nation, they are looking at Putin as potentially having, like I said, a few weaknesses there. They're not abandoning him. Yes, they're still on board formally as his allies. They're all going to march in lockstep for the time being. They still rely on Russia. But the very fact that they are willing to have some divergent policies, they may be thinking in the backdrop, he's not invulnerable, he's not impervious. Putin is perhaps not Superman, and perhaps we can pursue vestiges of our own foreign policies.
We'll see what comes out of that meeting in Samarkand today. Thank you very much for that, Douglas Herbert there.